From the very beginning, Jerusalem has been a name whispered through millennia, a city both sacred and scarred, born from dust yet elevated to eternity. Long before the rise of empires or the ringing of church bells and the call to prayer, there was a hill, rugged and silent, surrounded by olive groves and barren land. It was here that ancient peoples built their first settlements, unaware that their modest city would become the most contested and revered place on earth. The earliest traces of human habitation in Jerusalem stretch back more than 5,000 years into the early Bronze Age. Archaeological discoveries near the city of David reveal fortifications, water tunnels, and primitive dwellings from the 3rd millennium BC. The ancient Canaanites, a Semitic-speaking people, were among the first to inhabit this area, calling it Jerusalem, a name possibly meaning city of Shalem. After a Canaanite deity of dusk and peace, the name itself carried the seed of destiny, Salem, peace, and irony for a city that would rarely know it. By around 1800 BCE, the city had become a small but fortified Canaanite stronghold. Egyptian records from the 19th century BCE mention a place called Rusalimum, testifying to its early importance. During this time, Jerusalem was one of many Canaanite states that paid tribute to greater powers like Egypt. The Amarna letters, clay tablets from the 14th century BC found in Egypt, reveal the correspondence between the pharaohs and the local rulers of Canaan, including one named Abdi-Heba, the king of Jerusalem. In his desperate letters, Abdi-Heba pleaded for Egyptian aid against invading tribes known as the Habaru, possibly early Hebrews. His words, preserved in cuneiform, remind us that even then, Jerusalem was a city at the crossroads of politics and faith, forever vulnerable, forever desired. The Hebrew Bible places Jerusalem's great transformation in the time of King David, around 1000 BC. According to Scripture, David, ruler of the united tribes of Israel, captured the city from the Jebusites and made it his capital. Its neutral status, outside the tribal divisions, made it an ideal political and spiritual center. David brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, symbolizing divine favor and establishing the city as the heart of the Israelite faith. His son, Solomon, would later build the first temple, an architectural and spiritual marvel said to house the very presence of God. This moment marks the beginning of Jerusalem's identity as the holy city, a place where heaven and earth touched. Solomon's temple became the center of Jewish worship, drawing pilgrims from across the region. But after Solomon's reign, the United Kingdom fractured into Israel in the north and Judah in the south, with Jerusalem as Judah's capital. The Assyrians, the Babylonians, and later the Persians would each leave their mark upon the city. In 586 BC, the Babylonians under King Nebuchadnezzar Roman II destroyed Solomon's temple, burned Jerusalem to the ground, and carried its elite population into exile in Babylon. For the Jewish people, this was not just a political catastrophe, it was a theological crisis. Yet out of exile came renewal. Prophets like Ezekiel and Jeremiah redefined faith, teaching that God's presence was not bound to a single place. When the Persian king Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon in 539 BC, he allowed the exiled Jews to return home. They rebuilt the city and constructed the Second Temple around 516 BC, beginning a new chapter in Jerusalem's long saga. The Persians ruled lightly, allowing religious autonomy, but the city remained under the shadow of empires. After Alexander the Great's conquests, Jerusalem passed through the hands of Hellenistic rulers, the Ptolemies of Egypt and the Seleucids of Syria. Greek culture and language flowed into the region, sparking both adaptation and resistance. In 167 BC, when the Seleucid king Antiochus Roman 4 desecrated the temple by dedicating it to Zeus. The Jewish priest Mattathias and his sons, known as the Maccabees, rose in revolt. Their victory led to the rededication of the temple, commemorated today by the festival of Hanukkah. For about a century, Jerusalem stood as the capital of an independent Jewish kingdom under the Hasmonean dynasty, but independence was fleeting. In 63 BC, the Roman general Pompey entered the city, and from that moment, Jerusalem would live under the shadow of Rome. Roman rule brought monumental architecture, but also deep tensions. King Herod the Great, a client king under Rome, rebuilt the Second Temple on a grander scale, turning it into one of the marvels of the ancient world. Yet beneath the splendor simmered resentment. Heavy taxation, cultural intrusion, and religious tension fueled unrest. In 66 C, rebellion erupted. The Jewish war against Rome ended in catastrophe. In 70 C, the Roman legions under Titus besieged Jerusalem, destroying the Second Temple and slaughtering or enslaving its inhabitants. The sacred city was reduced to ashes once more, and the Temple Mount lay in ruins. Only a fragment of its western retaining wall survived the Western Wall, which remains one of Judaism's holiest sites. After the devastation, Jerusalem was refashioned into a Roman city called Aelia Capitolina. The Emperor Hadrian banned Jews from entering and erected pagan temples over the ruins. But centuries later, Christianity would emerge from Jerusalem's story. For it was here, according to the Gospels, that Jesus of Nazareth preached, was crucified, and rose again. In the 4th century CE, the Roman Empire embraced Christianity under Emperor Constantine, and Jerusalem once more became a spiritual center, this time for a new faith. Constantine's mother, Helena, made a pilgrimage to the Holy Land and is said to have discovered the true cross. Churches rose upon holy sites, including the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, built over what Christians believed to be the tomb of Christ. For the next several centuries, Jerusalem was transformed into a Christian pilgrimage center. Monks, pilgrims, and theologians from across the empire traveled to the holy city. Yet peace was fleeting. In 614 C, Persian armies captured Jerusalem, destroying many churches and seizing the relic of the true cross. The Byzantines later recaptured it, but the balance of power was shifting. In 638 C, the Muslim armies of Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab entered Jerusalem. The city surrendered peacefully, and Umar is said to have shown great respect for Christian holy sites. For Muslims, Jerusalem became the third holiest city in Islam, after Mecca and Medina. It was here, according to Islamic tradition, that the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven during the Isra and Miraj. The Umayyad caliphs built the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque upon the temple Mount Haram al-Sharif, a site that has remained central to Islamic devotion ever since. Under Islamic rule, Jerusalem flourished as a city of faith, scholarship, and tolerance. Jews were allowed to return after centuries of exile. The city became a living mosaic of cultures: Arab, Persian, Jewish, Christian, all coexisting under varying degrees of peace. The Fatimid, Abbasid, and Seljuk dynasties each controlled it in turn, but in 1099 a new force emerged from the west, the Crusaders. Responding to Pope Urban Roman II's call to reclaim the Holy Land, European knights marched eastward in the First Crusade. When they captured Jerusalem, they unleashed horrific slaughter. Muslims and Jews were massacred in the streets. The Crusaders established the Kingdom of Jerusalem, transforming the city into a Latin Christian stronghold. They built castles, churches, and hospitals, but their hold would not last. In 1187, the great Muslim leader Salah ad-Din Saladin retook Jerusalem after defeating the Crusaders at the Battle of Hattin. His reconquest was marked not by vengeance but by mercy. Unlike the Crusaders, he spared the city's inhabitants and allowed Christian pilgrims to visit their holy sites. For centuries afterward, Jerusalem changed hands between Muslims and Crusaders, enduring siege after siege, until it was firmly returned to Muslim control under the Ayyubids and later the Mamluks. Under these rulers, the city regained its status as a center of learning and worship. Pilgrims continued to arrive, Christian, Jewish, and Muslim alike. Yet the city's fortunes waxed and waned. In 1517, the Ottoman Turks under Sultan Selim I conquered Jerusalem, bringing it into an era of relative stability that would last 400 years. Under Ottoman rule, the city was beautified and protected. Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent rebuilt Jerusalem's walls, the ones that still encircle the old city today. He restored the Dome of the Rock and repaired the city's water systems. Jerusalem remained a small but spiritually immense city, divided into quarters, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and Armenian, each preserving its traditions within the same walls. As the centuries passed, the world beyond Jerusalem changed rapidly. European powers expanded, global trade routes shifted, and the industrial age dawned. Yet Jerusalem seemed suspended in time. In the 19th century, however, renewed Western interest in the Holy Land brought explorers, archaeologists, and missionaries. Britain, France, and Russia all sought influence, funding churches and consulates. The city became a stage for imperial rivalry wrapped in religious devotion. By the early 20th century, the Ottoman Empire was crumbling. During World War I, British forces under General Edmund Allenby entered Jerusalem in 1917, ending 4 centuries of Ottoman rule. The British governed the city under the Palestine Mandate, promising a national home for the Jewish people, while also pledging to respect the rights of the Arab inhabitants. But these promises were in conflict, and the seeds of future struggle were sown. Throughout the 1920s and 1930s, tensions between Jews and Arabs in Jerusalem escalated. The influx of Jewish immigrants fleeing European persecution, combined with rising Arab nationalism, led to riots and deepening mistrust. The Holocaust in Europe intensified global sympathy for the Jewish cause, and in 1948, following the withdrawal of British forces, the State of Israel was declared. War broke out immediately between Israel and neighboring Arab states. Jerusalem was divided, the western part under Israeli control, and the eastern, including the Old City, under Jordanian rule. For the next 19 years, a wall divided Jerusalem. Jews were denied access to their holiest sites, including the Western Wall. But in 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israel captured East Jerusalem, uniting the city once again under Israeli control. The moment was both triumphant and tragic, celebrated by some as the restoration of a capital, mourned by others as the loss of their homeland. Israel declared Jerusalem its eternal and indivisible capital, while Palestinians continued to dream of making East Jerusalem the capital of their own future state. Since then, Jerusalem has remained at the center of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a city claimed by 2 peoples and revered by 3 faiths. Its streets are filled with pilgrims and soldiers, prayers and protests. The old city remains divided into its ancient quarters, where the sound of church bells mingles with the muezzin's call and the chanting of rabbis. It is a place where faith collides with politics, and where every act, every stone moved or prayer whispered, carries deep symbolic weight. Yet Jerusalem endures. Beneath its tension and tragedy lies something indestructible, a sense of the sacred, a pulse of hope. Pilgrims still weep at the Western Wall, kneel in the church of the Holy Sepulchre, and bow toward the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Children play in its narrow alleys, unaware that their laughter echoes through 5 millennia of history. Jerusalem's story is not one of simple conquest or faith. It is a mirror of humanity itself, It has been built, destroyed, and rebuilt countless times, just as human civilizations rise and fall. Its beauty lies not only in its holiness, but in its endurance. Every empire that claimed it has passed away. Every conqueror who ruled it has vanished. But the city remains fragile yet eternal. To walk through Jerusalem today is to walk through the corridors of time. The stones beneath one's feet have felt the march of prophets, kings, and crusaders. The air carries prayers in 100 tongues. It is a city that never stops being reborn, never ceases to matter. The entire history of Jerusalem is ultimately the history of belief, of how humans in their yearning for the divine have poured meaning into a single place. And though its walls have seen endless war, its spirit continues to whisper the ancient promise that first gave it its name, Jerusalem, the city of peace. A peace still longed for, still unfinished, but forever possible. Jerusalem is not just a city, it is a living chronicle of faith, conflict, and coexistence, standing at the heart of three of the world's great religions. Its streets are layered with centuries of human devotion, its stones heavy with prayer, and its air thick with history. For Jews, it is the eternal capital promised by God, where the ancient temples once stood, and where generations have turned their faces in prayer. For Christians, it is the sacred ground where Jesus walked, preached, was crucified, and rose again, a place where heaven seemed to touch the earth. For Muslims, it is Al-Quds, the noble sanctuary, the site of the Prophet Muhammad's miraculous night journey and ascension to heaven. Every corner of Jerusalem bears witness to this intertwining of faiths. The golden dome of the rock gleams beside the western wall, and not far away, church bells echo through the ancient alleys of the old city. Within a few square kilometers, the world's great spiritual traditions converge, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in tension, but always in reverence. And yet, beyond its sanctity, Jerusalem is also a testament to human endurance. It has been built and destroyed more than any other city of its kind. It has seen conquerors, crusaders, and kings. It has known peace as a whisper and war as a constant. But through every trial, Jerusalem has never ceased to live. Its people, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, have carried their faith and identity through centuries of turmoil, proving that the spirit of the city cannot be conquered by sword or empire. To speak of Jerusalem is to speak of humanity's longing for meaning, belonging, and divine connection. It is a place where the sacred and the mortal coexist, where faith is not just practiced but felt in the rhythm of life itself. It stands as a reminder that though we are divided by belief, we are united by the same search for hope, for peace, and for something greater than ourselves. Jerusalem, in all its beauty and burden, is the world's shared memory, a mirror reflecting both the best and worst of human nature, and an eternal symbol of our struggle to live together under the gaze of God. Every stone of Jerusalem tells a story of divine promise, human ambition, and the unending struggle for peace. To walk through its ancient streets is to walk through the chapters of time itself, where every wall, every gate, every scar bears witness to centuries of hope and heartbreak. The city is a mosaic of memories, each stone laid by a different hand, each era building upon the ruins of the last, and each generation dreaming of peace, even as the echoes of conflict linger in air. The stones of Jerusalem have heard the prayers of prophets and the cries of soldiers. They have seen kings crowned and temples burned, pilgrims arriving in tears, and conquerors leaving in ruin. This same stones that once felt the footsteps of David and Solomon later trembled beneath Roman legions, crusader armies, and Ottoman builders. Yet, through it all, they have endured silent witnesses to humanity's eternal dialogue with the divine. There is a divine promise etched into the soul of Jerusalem, a promise that peace will one day dwell where swords have clashed, and faith will unite what history has divided. But there is also human ambition woven into its story, for every empire that desired Jerusalem sought not only holiness but power. The city has been claimed in the name of God by many who forgot the very essence of the God they invoked: compassion, mercy, and peace. Still, despite all the conflict and conquest, the stones remain, weathered but steadfast, carrying the weight of countless generations who refused to give up on hope. They remind us that peace is not built in a single moment, but through the endurance of faith and the courage to forgive. Jerusalem's stones are not silent. They speak of the human spirit's resilience, of faith that endures even in the shadow of despair. They whisper of promises yet unfulfilled, of prayers still unanswered, and of a future that humanity continues to seek, a future where the city of peace might finally live up to its name. Every stone, every wall, every breath in Jerusalem is part of a living testament, a reminder that even in a world torn by division, the quest for peace is the most sacred act of all. To understand Jerusalem's past is to understand the history of humanity itself, its hopes, its divisions, and its eternal search for meaning. For Jerusalem is not merely the story of a single city, but the reflection of the entire human journey, our yearning for faith, our hunger for power, and our endless pursuit of peace. Within its walls, the light of revelation and the shadow of conflict have always walked side by side, shaping the destiny of nations and the conscience of civilization. Through Jerusalem, we see how belief can inspire greatness and yet ignite wars, how the quest for the divine can unite millions even as it divides them. Here, humanity's deepest virtues and its darkest flaws have been laid bare. It is a place where compassion and conquest have shared the same streets, where prayers rise from the same stones that once soaked in blood. To study Jerusalem's history is to confront our own contradictions, the way we seek the sacred while struggling with the human impulses of pride, fear, and desire. From the prophets who preached justice and mercy, to the empires that built walls and temples in their own glory, Jerusalem mirrors the duality of mankind. It teaches us that civilization is not built on power alone, but on understanding, respect, and remembrance. Each faith that has called Jerusalem holy has left behind a piece of its soul, a testament to our shared longing for meaning in a world often lost in chaos. And perhaps that is why Jerusalem continues to captivate hearts and minds. It reminds us that humanity's story has never been about perfection, but persistence, the ability to rise again after every fall, to hope after every heartbreak, and to seek light even in the deepest night. The city's past, with all its triumphs and tragedies, is the world's mirror, revealing that our true strength lies not in conquest, but in coexistence. To understand Jerusalem, then, is to understand ourselves, our faith, our fragility, and our timeless belief that even amid the ruins of history, peace is still possible, and meaning still endures.